All right, what's up, world? Welcome back to I Mix What I Like. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. And joining us once again, is brother Amari Johnson, who, among many other things, is an independent scholar, filmmaker, and musician. You still based in Philly?
I am for now, yeah.
In Philly, but a global African, if there's ever been one, and is here to talk mostly about Under a Black Star, the Maroon Impulse in New Orleans, a brand new book he's come out with that I'm thoroughly enjoying. But before we get there, not only are you, as we talked about before, a co-founder of the original Black Power Media with brother Tafari Samori,
Yeah,
who you
Tafari
write
Kimberly.
about in the book.
That's right.
And I didn't know about his repatriation, so this is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna come back to that. But before we get to that, we got to start with the YouTube work and the guitar work and the music.
I'm not mad at it.
We got to start there. I got to start there. I'm thoroughly loving what you're doing there. So could we talk a little bit about the channel for a second before what you're doing with it from your perspective?
Sure. I mean, to me, it's all connected. I talk about music in the book because there was, I was in grad school when I got to New Orleans, but shortly after arriving, I fell back in love with my one true love, which was guitar. And just being surrounded by it in the city, I had to pick it up. And that kind of brought me into that path. So on the one hand, the book is the result of the research I was doing, but also, I was cultivating my love and refinement of music at the time. So I have a YouTube channel, Amari Rebel, which I really have been focusing on a series called Solar Rock Radio. So Solar Rock, which, as we'll get into, talk about Maronage and Maroonage. Solar rock is a genre and a state of being. So it is, as a genre, incorporating the best of African musical traditions, but as a state of being, it is a place where we are free to explore and experiment and really experience those things that this world doesn't have for us. So Solar Rock Radio is a weekly exploration of the sounds and stories of Black music from all over the world. Obviously, I'm centering guitar because that is my sort of entry point to all of it, but really just getting into the music that has nourished us for centuries at this point. So that's really what it is. I mean, I've been having a lot of fun with it. I'm really enjoying the response. And it also allows me to explore my wide range of musical taste. So from, the next one will be on Fela, right? So we're going to be talking about Fela, Bob Marley, Jimi Hendrix, Sly and the Family Stone, to people like Janelle Monáe or Chronix or Luigi Luna, who is a Afro-Brazilian singer. So I think for me, it's like, man, there's a common thread throughout all of this. And I just want to expose, our people to that and really just tap in on what we've been working on and what we continue to work on that feeds us and helps us grow.
Did you ever see the documentary Electric Purgatory?
No. Oh, you know what? No, that's been on my list for a minute.
Oh man, you gotta. Because it's. Oh man, I don't know. It's maybe even 20 years old. I don't know. But it's a documentary about Black guitarists and the purgatory that is part of the argument that Black guitar musicians and rock musicians and non R&B or hip hop musicians are relegated to.
Yeah.
And one of the points that they start off with, and I won't ruin anything, is that there's like this shocking reveal that Black people play guitar.
Yeah.
It's is that still a thing? Are people? Do you find that people are still shocked to see Africans with guitars?
It is, but it's for me. I had a Instagram series for a minute where I said Black people love guitar, and I would just replay some of the classics, whether it be the Isley Brothers or Tony or Indy Ari. But the fact is that guitar has always been central to our music, right? It may not have always been the sort of the spotlight, but it is always been an element, right? Whether it be gospel, blues, rock, which is our music, R&B, neo soul, right? In fact, if you YouTube neo soul, what they're calling neo soul nowadays is they took that one from us too. But
oh
the
no,
point is that, but it's all built around guitar. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, I know we'll get to that in a minute, was when we were when my band at the time was the Black Star Bangers, and we were part of a Liberated Soul Collective, when we were touring the South in these juke joints, it when it came time for the guitar solo, oh, it was a high pressure environment, because that is what people respond to, right? It may not be the first thing that we think of, right? When we're like, oh, what do I like about music? But when we're somewhere and someone's playing a guitar, like a screeching electric guitar solo, everyone stops to listen. So yeah, it's strange to me how it's often overlooked, but it's always been right there.
Right on. Last thing on it, I just wanted to shout you out because I had like a almost like a comedic drive-through experience recently because I had just watched your essay on Maggot Brain,
All right.
the great Eddie Hazel
Hmm.
guitar solo from Parliament Funkadelic, and you said you told him I had never heard that part where you said that he was told to go into the studio and play like his mother had died, even though
Right.
she was quite living.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And then I went and listened to it, and I got so wrapped up in it again because I hadn't heard it in a while that I almost missed my whole, like I was holding up the line. People were like all upset, like it was like a whole. I went off, I
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's one of them solos. It's just
Yeah.
like 8 minutes or whatever. It's just beautiful. It's just anyway. So everybody should check that out. Please avail yourself of that.
Appreciate that.
Amari Rebel channel link is in the show description.
Appreciate it.
So let me just pull the cover up here so folks
Oh yeah.
can see what we're here to talk about. Under a Black Star, the Maroon Impulse in New Orleans. I cannot wait for everyone to get a chance to read it and to finish reading some of it myself. I haven't gotten to everything as carefully as I would like to, but let me just have you start with an overview summary. What is the book about? What were you and are you intending to do with it? And yeah, we'll go from there.
The book is about a community of Black people in New Orleans a few years after Katrina who were seeking to build community autonomy. And they did that through a bookstore, Black Star Books and Cafe, and a school, a homeschool collective, Kamali Academy. So it really dives into, New Orleans after Katrina was the Wild West in a lot of ways. There was utter devastation. 118 of the 126 schools had been destroyed, and the state of Louisiana basically took over right away. They long wanted to take over New Orleans, right? Calling a failing school system. There was a lot of corruption, a lot of things that weren't working about it. But the first thing that they did was they basically gave it to the highest bidder. So charter schools, people from all over the country would get $100,000 jobs to run schools for Black children in, at that time they were like makeshift trailers. So when I moved to New Orleans in 2009, so I started going in 2007, but in 2009 when I moved, I got a job at one of those charter schools. And we long heard that charter education is the privatization of public education. I mean, the worst. The particular school that I worked at, had to close its doors because of so many violations and greed. But to see from the inside all of the things that were happening, one of the examples I bring up in the book is that funding for the schools were determined by headcount at the beginning of the year and test scores at the end of the year. So once we've got our funding at the beginning of the year, if you're a knucklehead, we're sending you out, right? So the population would dip. And then at the end of the year, it wasn't about how many people passed, it was what percentage of people passed. So if it were only, 10 people who took the test, well, we got 9 of them to pass, then we had a 90% score rate. So what was happening, especially to some of my students, because I was a literacy specialist, so I was helping, young people, learn to read basic phonics and things like that. What was happening was the principal and the vice principal were coming at them and saying, "Don't come to school tomorrow, because that's when the tests are." You know what I mean? So that's the sort of corruption that was afoot during this time. So, the book really gets into that's one of the chapters that focuses on the educational landscape. But then on the other hand, you've got a homeschool collective that my brother Samori Kamar, who was my roommate at the time, he opened a school in our house. I left the school I was working at to work at Kamali Academy, where we were supplying and offering what he calls an education for liberation. So it's really just about how this community of people were really trying to build the world for themselves through what I call the unseen presence, right, in the shadows, and the successes and failures that happened along the way.
There's something you mentioned that really took me back, and it's a point that I'm very, very glad that you brought up. and I did want to talk a little bit about this the what is sort of a central point for you. Correct if I'm wrong in this book in the story, which is Hurricane Katrina,
Yeah.
and you. So I want you to, if you would, to because I know not everybody will remember, not some
Yeah.
you might not even have been paying attention or even been in some cases born yet, but
Yeah.
um the one point that you said something in here that I was that is super key to me, and I'm glad it's to see you did that, is that the hurricane did not hit New
Right.
Orleans.
Right. That's right.
So Mother Nature again is getting an abuse of blame that
That's
is
right.
undue.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about Katrina, what
Yeah, of
actually
course.
happened, and then how it figures into your narrative here?
Yeah, I mean, the first of all, in August, it's 20 years. It will be 20 years
Oh
since
wow,
Katrina,
that's
right?
right.
August
Oh my
28th. And
God.
so,
Wow,
so
that's
yeah,
right.
it's been a long time. For me, it was such a foundational experience because, growing up from Jersey, in all of the Northeastern arrogance, we did not have no allowance for any
Exactly.
hip hop or rap that was coming out of anywhere except
Facts.
we would acknowledge what was
Facts.
happening on the West Coast, right? But
And I'm in Maryland, and I was hanging on to that Northeast elite
yo,
arrogance. Like, nah, I'm not trying to hear none of this
Yo,
nonsense.
man, let me tell you. I remember I got some cousins in Virginia. We had gone down to see them one time, and for some reason, my pops from North Carolina, which I'll get to in a second, was we would go down and spend 2 weeks in the summer with my grandparents. And it was always amazing that they actually got music first down there, right? So the
Mm.
songs that we would hear when we were down there wouldn't have been out in the north. By the time we got back to the north, they were out. But we went to see my cousins in Virginia, and they were like, "Yo, we gotta play something for you." He's like, "All right, whatever." They put on this country, me and you, yo
Yeah.
mama and yo and we were like, yo, what is this? Bro, can you believe our arrogance allowed us to almost overlook Outcast? Yo,
Oh no, I can. I can. Absolutely.
yo. Like I stopped in the mall the other day. Yo, I mean, I'm like, man, but the point is that like, so because at that time, well, what was New Orleans to us? Right? What was of relevance to us? Well, Master P, I couldn't, comprehend what the appeal of, No Limit was. There was Cash Money and all of that. Musically, that's what was it. That didn't appeal to us. There was nothing about New Orleans. I remember my father telling me that New Orleans was a bowl below sea level, but I had no sort of consciousness about it. But it wasn't until the summer, August of 2005, when I remember going to see my grandfather in North Carolina, and we just sat there for days looking at the television and seeing how they were representing what was happening, right? The flood waters that completely submerged the city. And looters, the lawlessness that was happening in the Superdome. They're flying over and they're showing hundreds of people New Orleans in August, in the middle of the afternoon. They're on the bridges, right, with the sun beating down on them. And then the news is doing interviews with people. And I'm saying to myself, well, how is it that the news can get on the ground, but where are the government? Where are the people to evacuate them, right? So that had such a profound impact on me that when I got back to New York, where I was in undergrad, I joined the only organization in the city that was talking about self-determination for the Black nation. And ironically, one of the first projects I was on was helping people from New Orleans who had been evacuated to New York. And FEMA was saying that they were no longer going to pay for their housing, right? Their hotels and things like that. But Hurricane Katrina was, it's often talked about as a hurricane, a category 4 or 5. By the time it actually made landfall on the Gulf Coast, it had really come down to a 2 or a 1, depending on when you know, what source you're looking at. The actual impact was because of something that people had been calling attention to for decades, which was an insufficient levee system. So, like I said, New Orleans is below the sea level, and they have a levee system around the city that will basically prevent the Mississippi River or the Lake Pontchartrain on the other side from coming over in there. The Army Corps of Engineers, there was a series of things. I mean, people from the government, people from independent researchers were saying this is insufficient. This is going to be a problem, and it was. So the levees broke in several places, and the water got in, and that's what flooded the city. So it wasn't Hurricane Katrina. It was the rising waters as the result of that. But more importantly, it was government neglect, right, and lack of foresight. Now, I'm not necessarily a conspiracy theorist, but there have been many people who have argued, because if you, it was Hurricane Bessie, they actually did break the levee in order to flood out part of the city as part of a plan, right? So there are people who do say that there was an intentional breach of the levee. I don't have any incontrovertible evidence, but it has been done in the past, right? Oh yeah.
No, and I'm forgetting the name of there was somebody I keep meaning to look. There's somebody in Congress at the time, Republican in the House or the Senate, who said that Mother Nature had done what we had been trying to do through public policy for years, which was to
Mm,
flood out the poor Black folks so they could create. At the time, they were calling it. They wanted New Orleans to be the Disneyland of the South. Uh, uh, I guess technically Florida is not the South or whatever, but to them, but you know, like they wanted, that's what they wanted, and they had to get rid of. And you know, just quickly, that arrogance. I've shared this before, but you know, I felt the same way when Cash Money and Master P and all them came out. I was not a fan and all
yeah.
that, and I used to hate, just like, you know. And then this would have been maybe a couple years before Katrina. A friend of mine took a job down there, and we
Right.
drove down there to move them. And we went through and around all of those projects where Cash Money and them came
Mm,
from.
yeah.
I had never seen anything like that.
Yo,
Like
yeah, yeah,
I was like, I immediately changed. I was like, I don't care about the music. Do whatever you got to do to get out of here.
yeah,
Whatever garbage rap you got to sling or whatever you got to do. I was like, I couldn't believe that in 2000 whatever there were still projects in communities in this country that look like that. I was
yeah,
very naive. And and then after Katrina, when I went down there, a year later, it was just a year later, and saw how devastated things still were.
yeah.
And to see, I had never seen the levee up close.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's underwhelming.
You're looking at that thing like they thought this
Yeah,
was supposed
yeah,
to protect somebody, and
yeah.
it's like right next to somebody's
That's
house.
right. That's right. That's right.
It's
That's
like
right.
right there.
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
you, and I'm like, to your point, people have been saying for years, this is not sustainable. This is not
yeah,
safe. And then when you see it, it's like, who's arguing against that? Like it was so obvious to me that. And then yeah, I saw. You know, we interviewed people down there. They said we heard the explosions on the
yeah.
levees.
That's right. Hmm.
We interviewed people that had talked about years before the bigger stories came out, that the police and vigilantes were sniping Black people
Yep.
trying to just come across a bridge or find
Yeah.
some
Yep.
safety. They were getting
Hmm.
shot, and like people didn't want to. Man, I remember I brought the story back to my university in
Hmm.
2006. It was like, do we see what's going on? People were like, that can't be this.
Yeah.
So it was so I'm very glad that you made that point. And then uh okay, so I am also fascinated by your discussion of Marinage. Um so could you talk about that and what a little bit more of what it means for you and how you deploy that concept in the book?
I can. Before I do though, I want to
Sure.
follow up on one thing, which
Sure, sure,
was,
sure.
so what I was talking about just now, what we've been speaking about of New Orleans, excludes one neighborhood, which is actually where the book takes place, and that is
Mm.
Algiers on the west bank of the Mississippi River, which is above sea level. So the devastation that happened in Algiers was not the same, or not rooted in the same thing that, well, I guess you can make an argument that it was rooted, but it wasn't water that damaged and impacted Algiers. This is an important point for me, because number one, one of the main things is when I first moved to New Orleans. So my brother Samori, he's from Algiers. So when he's like, "Oh, I'm moving back to New Orleans," I had finished my coursework at Texas, which is where we were both students at the time. I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna head back to New Orleans." We were doing Make It Plain, the People's Talk thing at the time. We
That's
kind of
right.
wanted
That's
to
right.
continue the work that we were doing. We moved to Algiers, and everybody's like, "Why are you moving out there? Yo, it's so country. It's so far." It's literally across the bridge. It's closer geographically to the French Quarter, to the central business district, than many other parts of the city. But culturally, It's
It's out there.
it's a different place.
Yeah.
The impact of Katrina on the West Bank, on Algiers in particular, is uh, white terrorism. So Algiers is, as soon as you come over the Crescent City connection, you're in Algiers, right? For one exit, and then you're out into Jefferson Parish. Now that's important. One of the things I talk about in the second chapter of the book, second chapter, second chapter, is Jefferson Parish is where all the white flight happened. So when we talk about, there's a documentary called "Welcome to New Orleans," which was filmed in the days following Katrina, where people they're interviewing these white guys who were like, "Yeah, it was like pheasant season in South Dakota," you know,
Exactly.
and those are the people who were living in Jefferson Parish and parts of Algiers, particularly Algiers Point and things like that. But you're in Algiers when you come over. So I always talk about this one story. It's not is I didn't write this in the book. It was in my dissertation about the sister whose father was a fire chief. And what happens is power, electricity, everything is mayhem on the East Bank. But if you look out in the distance, you see lights, you see electricity, which means you see shelter, you see safety. So everybody was wading through the water to make their way to the bridge. The the sister's father leads people up the bridge where they're met by Jefferson Parish police who have formed a barricade, guns drawn, turn around, go back. Now, mind you, he's a fire chief, which means he knows them. He knows them. He's worked with these people before. He says, "Yo, it's us. We just need to." They pull guns and they told him he had to go back. Now, mind you, the bridge is run by the state of Louisiana, and when you get down, you're still in New Orleans. That didn't matter. They went beyond their jurisdiction to prevent them from coming. And last time I was on, we talked about A.C. Thompson and in his work in terms of talking about those instances and where white people were literally hunting black people for sport. And I talk about that partially in the book, but I wanted to mention that because that really sets up a lot for the whole argument as to why this Black Star community of Black Star Books and Cafe and Kamali Academy was important and how it's rooted in a larger tradition. The last thing I'll say about Algiers wasn't a part of New Orleans until much later. And while some people say that Treme is the oldest African American neighborhood in the country, I offer an argument that you can say that Algiers actually was, because this is when the Africans were brought into Louisiana. They were here to be seasoned and then sent across the river or up the river, right? Some were a permanent settlement and others were transient. All of that is to say that the grounds of Algiers is very important for the story that would become the Black Star community. So I just wanted to touch on that. Now, when we get into maroonage or marronage, to say for English sake, we'll say maroonage. I've always felt that maroonage has a lot to teach us for contemporary struggles, for liberation, for freedom, for autonomy, for self-determination. Whereas they are generally spoken about as those Africans who escaped the plantation in order to, acquire some sort of freedom in the hills, the valleys, the swamps, in some cases, the cities, right? I think that definition is a little bit limited for our purposes. And if we broadened it up, we would be able to see new possibilities. So for instance, I talk about the fact that it's a bit wordy, I understand, but the language is important. And if we look at marronage as the African martial cultural tradition of escaping repressive socioeconomic and cultural environments in the pursuit of autonomy and self-determination, then it opens it up beyond just something that was relegated to the past, right? In other words, if we say it's this, forgive us for saying the slaves who escaped, right? If you escape, then you're no longer, unless of course you're saying that by nature black is slave, but that's another conversation. That's for your Afro pessimist friends. The if we're saying that, then maroons are those who escape the plantation. Once the plantation ceases to exist, so does marronage, right? But I'm saying that if we look at it like a cultural tradition that we have seen traces of and evidence of on the African continent in every single place that Africans were taken throughout the world, how is it that we have responded to our situation in remarkably similar ways, no matter where we were taken or where we were taken from, right? If not to some larger cultural tradition based off of values, based off of principles, based off of practices, right? Furthermore, I talk about maroonage as a process, not only a product, right? So, in other words, if we say it's a product, if we say the product is the maroon community, and if we don't achieve that, then we didn't practice maroonage. Whereas if we look at maroonage as a process, then it opens up new possibilities for its expression. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that we're, living in the caves and hiding out and all of that, right? That may be one expression of it. But what are some other expressions? Could it be, the jazz clubs in Chicago in the 30s and 40s? Could it be, underground house parties in New York in the 90s and two? You get what I'm saying? Like, these are all different possibilities that are opened up to us by expanding our understanding of what maroonage and marronage could be.
So I can't, so someone, I don't want to, I can't help it, but not to, I don't want to drag you into anything silly, but but there's something, well, first of all, I thought it was funny because you do talk about the libidinal economy and
Yeah.
whatnot. You make great, so I was like, I didn't know, how close you were trying to get to the Afro pessimists, to my Afro pessimist friends, but,
Yeah.
but really don't, but you have a positive reference to someone, I'll just leave. I won't mention it, but you have a positive reference to someone in your book that I witnessed a very hot. I was actually part of a very hostile exchange around the
Mm,
definition of maroonage, and their argument was very aggressive in saying that specifically that nobody in Black liberation, the Black Panther Party in particular, could be considered part of the Maroon tradition,
mm,
because for them the definition had to require separating fully geographically,
yeah.
separating fully in terms of an economy. I remember one of the points was they were even
Mm,
yelling at me, did the Black Panther Party set up their own coins? Did they have their own coins for exchange?
yeah.
And so I was fascinated and appreciative, admittedly, of how you, if I may use the word, stretch the definition to incorporate these other forms that may not look like, as you point out, what is connected to what we traditionally understand about with chattel enslavement.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting, and I appreciated that.
Well, I
So
wanna I
yeah.
wanna be. I mean, I'm mindful because I do also believe in the inflation of language, where everything means everything, so nothing means anything, right?
Hmm.
And I'm saying this not so much as to be like, hey, how can I justify calling more people maroons? Because that's actually not what I do. I don't call the Black Star community maroons per se, right? I said that they engage practices of marronage. And
Mm.
particularly by responding to what I call a maroon impulse, which to me is that seed that was sparked, right? That would lead, when I call it an Afro diasporic cultural tradition. What was it that impelled all of those people to respond in the similar way, as Malcolm would say, as Bob and Malcolm would say, any place is better than here. We're leaving. The issue for me is a strict definition of maroonage and trying to put firm boundaries on it undermines the argument that you're trying to make. Because if you spend time in the archive, you will see that for every example of maroonage that affirms what it is you're trying to say, there are 20 examples that go against it. And in that point, in and of itself, the idea of physical separation, well, Salvador da Bahia, right, which is a place where I used to live and spent a lot of time there, is a perfect example. Revolta dos Malais, right, which was the Malay Jose, what's his name? João Jose Reis, slave revolts in Brazil.
Mm.
I think that's the book. Talks about the revolt of the Malays, which were Islamic Africans in 1835 in Salvador. In the city, there was a maroon community, Engenho Velho da Federação, which is still around, right? It's where I went to school when I was out there. That was a place that was a maroon community. That was where the Malays would come. There was a Terreiro de Candomblé, which is still around, right? Terreiro de Bogum. That was where they would meet to plan the revolt. Places like Urubu, places like Kabula, places all throughout the city of Salvador, and this is just Salvador alone, a city that had maroon communities. So it's not always about physical separation, right? There doesn't need to be some geographical distance in order for it to be marronage. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that's why I don't always limit it in terms of the physicality of it, because, or the geography of it, I should say, because to me, this is really the central argument. I want to reshift our focus from escape to pursuit. Escape to pursuit. Bob Marley, says it, you're running and you're running and you're running away, but you can't run away from yourself. And the idea is, if all it's about is we have to get out of here, it's never about where we're going. It's reactive instead of proactive. You get what I'm saying? And to me, what we can learn from Maroonage is that this is how African people collectively, it's not an individual runaway, but a collective group of people decided that that they had their eyes and their sights on something else that was more valuable, more important, that was more urgent than their current environment, and they will go away. So there are two things I want to talk about in the book. One, I had the fortune to spend some time in Cuba with a particular hip hop group named Anónimo Consejo. And these brothers this was in the early 2000s. And they have a song called Loma y Machete, right? Hill and Machete. And it's all about Maroonage and where they're going. But what I love about their framing is, what is it that's in the hill? Abundant life, a spiritual community, freedom, right? And that's and that to me really serves as the chapter that I have, which is the first chapter, which really outlines my understanding of Maroonage, builds around that.
Well, let's talk about the you mentioned it already, but let's talk about the Black Star
Yeah.
collective and how it fits into your understanding of Maroonage or Maroonage,
Yeah.
and what it was and what it did and is doing now in perhaps other forms.
Yeah. 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 So, you know, there are two brothers, Samori Kamara is Bakir Tayehembe. Bakir was Samori's substitute teacher when he was in high school. And they kind of only had one interaction, but it really impacted Samori's understanding, right? He began to study African history and he went on to school and he reconnected with Bakir. And they were like, listen, we need to start a school. We need to start a bookstore and cafe. So initially, the way that it was that there was supposed to be an economic support for the school. And they said, we're going to call it Black Star. Obviously, after everything that the Black Star represents for us, right? Whether it be Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana, pan-africanism, or more importantly, Marcus Garvey, who, remember, when he was deported from the States, where was he deported from? New Orleans, just a few miles away from where Black Star was, which initially was on General Maya in Algiers. So they started the school, and Bakir has a background in the NOI, so he was like, "Yo, we going fishing." They went to the projects where Samori was from, and yo, we opened in a school. And initially they were focused on high school students, but that first year there were two students, and one was in and out of jail. So it was really one student who was the nephew of a sister that Samori went to school with, and it was a challenging year in a lot of ways. At the end of the year, which is a side note, which I don't really get too deep into the book, because I think it really deserves more study. There was a brother and a sister who showed up, who I think were like maybe 9 and 11 or something. They were smaller children, and they had been out of school all year. Now, this might have been February or March when they showed up. And the reason they were out of school was because, remember when I told you that 118 of the schools were completely destroyed. These charters were operating out of trailers that had limited seating. There were thousands of children in New Orleans who were not going to school in the years following Katrina because there wasn't enough physical space for them, right? Now, these kids have been out of school all year and had eventually come, to, at that time was called the Black Star Educational Cooperative, because there were no other options available to them. At the end of the year, Samori was like, yo, we're revamping this. Bakir is going to focus on the bookstore and cafe. I'm going to dive into the school, but we're going to focus on younger students. And that's when I came into the fold. So by the time we opened the next school year, we had 11 students and 16 teachers, right? I'm sorry, 16 teachers and 16 students and 11 teachers. So it was something that grew very quickly. And there's a few things that I want to point out here. And this might ruffle some feathers. We thought that the more politically minded, the pan-Africanist, the African-centered parents and families were the ones who would respond to us, and they weren't. The ones who responded were our folks. You know what I'm saying? Like those were the ones who responded. And the reason was because if Samori would make speeches at the time, he would say, yo, the graduation rate in New Orleans is 60%, Ladies, would you go to a beautician who would get your hair done right 60% of the time? Would you get on a plane that would land safely 60% of the time? Then why are you sending your children to these schools that are failing them, right? And it was, and this is actually when I talk about an impulse is visceral. It's not cerebral, right? These were people who understood that like something needs to be done. It's not a matter of me think it almost to the point where you've been driven to such desperation that you'll try anything, right? Um, those were the students who we initially worked with. Eventually, there were other folks who would call, "Hey, can I send?" You know, once they started to see the success of the school, um, but that you know, Kamali was a really important experience, and it is still around. You know, Samori left, I think in 2015. He was in Ghana for a few years. He came back a little bit, and then he's back in Ghana. But Kamali itself is in a virtual school, so there are students from all over the world. And one of the things that sort of came out of it was because we said it's not just a matter of replacing. When it first started, I was working at the charter school, so I was taking some of the workbooks, and then we would go home, and then we say, "Okay, listen, let's replace." You know, John goes to the mall becomes Kwesi goes to the market, and we were, you know, it was like almost a one-to-one with just replacing. But eventually, Samori developed an entire curriculum and curricular materials that are truly, you know, African centered beyond just substituting one for one, but actual conceptual approaches that are based in something different. You know, one of the things that I think I saw a few short years ago, there was a thing coming out of Scandinavia, Sweden, or somewhere like that, where they were saying that they were doing away with traditional subjects. But this was something that Samori had been doing earlier, right? English is history, or our story is math. So we're doing a word problem about Marcus Garvey, right? Which is covering, you know, language arts. It's covering our story. It's covering mathematics. There are scientific. You get what I'm saying? That all of it became a holistic experience. The last thing I'll say about this is that we believed in the one room schoolhouse model. This is how African people have been educated for, you know, and the idea behind it was one, these were people who were victims of the New Orleans educational system, but they were also old enough, or rather young enough, so that at the time, Katrina would have significantly impacted their educational experiences at a crucial time. They may have been 2, 3, 4 years old, right? And they were spending a year or more out of school. So now they're with us. Traditional educational models would say, you know, if you're 7, you're in this grade. If you're 8, you're in this grade. But the one room schoolhouse model was really more attuned to the idea that, yo, I might be stronger in English, but math, I'm not operating at my level. But because we're all mixed together, what we really saw to emerge was that there was a much more cooperative experience and approach to education. So now it's like, hey, yo, you know, Quadro, help this sister, please. Or, you know, so now the students are kind of becoming the teachers and tutors for one another. It really was a special experience that has shaped how I approach education and the education of my children, and I know so many others as well.
You know, I've had my own negative experiences with charter schools, and how the contradiction between the charter school movement and the African centered school movement and
Mm,
and Black independent school movement.
yeah,
So I'm wondering what your book or what your experience is arguing about that. Are you uh, uh, to what extent are you arguing is the model to are you arguing that with the like the Kamali Academy is this something you because my issue is let me just say this the issue I first of all the charter school I worked for was corrupt as hell and got shut down
mhm, yeah,
and was doing a lot of the chicanery you were talking about with the fugazi counting and accounting and all that other kind of stuff. It was a mess. But I have seen others with like is part of what you do talk about is that contradiction of you're saying we want to do a form of maronage or maroonage, and but we recognize that there are some, we recognize we are in this system, we're not entirely liberated, and there are limitations to what that freedom can
yeah,
look like. So are you and so anyway, so one of the issues I end up running into is that
mm,
when I see something good happening, like what you're talking about with the Kamali Academy and other efforts that I've seen and even witnessed, I don't see them as being duplicatable
That's a
or
really good point.
scalable to
Yeah,
account for all of the Africans in this country.
that's absolutely right. I
Okay, so
agree.
all right,
I agree with that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. y- I agree. First of all, I think that America is entirely too large, right? Any
Mhm,
governance of that many people, right, is inevitably going to be a failure.
mm,
I do believe, and I know that you and I have, jumped in and out of the conversation of intercommunalism and all of that sort of thing.
mhm,
But the thing for me about that is, I'm not saying this is a manual. I am saying that this can give you ideas for how to apply it to your local community. Because so I talked a lot about Kamali or Black Star Books and Cafe. So we left our first home, and really where Kamali opened was around the corner. I'm talking 2 blocks from Black Star Books and Cafe. Well, Black Star Books and Cafe was really a hangout spot, where there was everything going on in there: vegan brunch, martial arts classes, movie nights, business meetings, anything. It was just a communal space. The sort of main thing that we did was Liberation Lounge, which was an open mic every Sunday night. I'm proud to say that the Grammy award winning Tank and the Bangers came out of that. So my band was the Black Star Bangers, and we, like I said, we were part of the Liberated Soul Collective. And we would do like the Motown review, where we would get on a tour bus together. So there was people like Elliot Love or Nate Suave or Sybil Chanel, and then Terry on the Tank Ball was part of the crew as well. Um, but the idea there, though, is that idea of Liberation Lounge, which was rooted in 2 things: one, being in Philly, the Black Lily, of course, the famous fire spot where all of neo soul really springs from, and then also Fela's New African Shrine. So it was the idea, this is political and cultural. So every Sunday night, people remember the West Bank, Algiers, this country, everybody's coming from around the city and from different towns from throughout the country to be here in a space that was so small. I always say that Elliot Love has a music video called Run and Hide, which we filmed in Black Star. And that gives the best feeling of Liberation Lounge that we kind of captured on camera. Um, but the idea now is that this was a community of people. So the parents would be with us at Liberation Lounge on Sunday, and then on Monday morning, they're bringing their kids to school. You get what I'm saying? There were, some students who would be, Samori was really active in terms of, this is really active in their lives in terms of sports or anything. So we're going to their games, or, they're spending extra time at the school. And, so I'm saying that Kamali worked because it was part of an intentional community of people. Not that it necessarily is replicable in, I can write down every step of the way that this is what you need to do in order to replicate it. But the idea was, it was very intentional. It was very communal. And that's what I'm saying. So I don't know if a homeschool collective could sustain itself by itself if it weren't tapped into a larger community. So here in Philly, my children went to a homeschool and a Pan-African homeschool collective when they were younger. That's still a community that we're a part of. Martial arts and all the other, that's still a community that we're a part of. I don't, this may be controversial, but I don't really see a mass-based approach really being successful. You understand what I'm saying? In the sense that the resources is one thing, but I actually think more than that, it's about the intention. We don't all have the same desire, right? We could say abstract things like we want a safe and positive environment for our children, but that means different things to different people.
mhm.
So to say that, like, the school district of New Orleans is, we need to convert all of those so that they can be, directed into this education for liberation. I don't really see that as a viable option. You know, Uh, to make this parallel that I said I wouldn't make, is that maroonage itself was never a mass based approach.
It's a very good point. That's actually, I never even really thought of it that way. Uh, so then, wow, yeah, I actually never even considered that until this second. So 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 then is the argument that the concept or the idea, or that the few who do endeavor to this can do something that positively impacts the rest, or is it that it's that do what you can do until
Mm.
something falls? Yeah, I didn't.
Yo,
Honestly, I've really. I'm like, why have I never thought of it that way? Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, my this is where things kind of get sticky because I,
Mm,
I really Marcus Garvey, I quote him in the book as saying, I can't remember the exact quote, but the quote. I'm not saying that we want to bring all black people to Africa, and many of them were useless here and will likely be useless there. And while that's a bit more harsh of a tone than I would necessarily take, I want to go back to the idea of intention. There are people who really believe that the system will make openings for them as long as we appeal to their moral conscience. As Sister Soldier would say, "Where are the good white people? I want to meet them." Right, but where is this moral conscience coming from? Right, it doesn't exist. You're investing in something that has no historical precedent. You feel me now? But again, if that's what you're set on, if that's what you want, keep working that direction. But I think for many of us, so like I said, Samori is gone. He's left the country. Bakir has left the city. Right, he's where the community of people have purchased several acres and they're developing what at one time he was calling Black Star City, which was really just we want the space to be able to build for ourselves on our own terms, away from everybody else, right? Um, but I think that kind of is the main thing is what is the intention? What is the intention? Do you find people who are aligned with your values? And the reason that I kind of chuckled when you first presented this was because, again, I'm not trying to say that Maroons are heroes. I'm not making a moral claim on whether they were right or wrong, because we have historical examples where they were like, yo, we're going to liberate all the enslaved. We'll go. We also have examples where they were like, oh, you need us to get them for you? Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm not making a moral claim one way or the other, but I am saying that to me, what is really crucial is
mm,
how are you being intentional with what it is that you are pursuing? And if you are being intentional in the way of community autonomy and self-determination, then this book may have some ideas that could be helpful to you. One of the things that we haven't talked about today is what I call the unseen presence. When I was conceptualizing the book, I had started with this question, which thank God I evolved past. But what is the creative potential of the margin? Well, to ask a question in that way is to suggest that I am at the margin of my own experience, right? So it's never about what is the creative potential of the margin. In other words, those of us who have been marginalized by society, how can that work in our favor? Well, first thing is it can't, because you're considering yourself to be a marginalized person or a minority or so on and so forth. Rather, the question evolved more into how can we take advantage of those things unseen? Thus, the unseen presence. What is the black star? Is it the cat with the shade, the black shades, the black car? Is it shining from very far? So the original title of this book was A Curious Celestial Phenomenon, right? Taken straight from Yasin Bey, Mos
mm.
Def, right? It's against the canvas of the night appears a curious celestial phenomenon. What is it? It's the black star, right? But think about the concept of a black star. If a black star is on night, you don't see it, but it does exist, right? So I want to wrap it up with this. Um, the unseen presence. So if you look, because I know you had shown this. Let's see if it'll
Mhm.
focus. Up
Hold on,
here, there are street signs. Yeah, if you could, it would just make. Yeah, there you go. So if you see there are street signs, right? Let me see if it'll. Anyway,
you can
the
almost see it if it almost gets into focus right on if you get it. Yeah, like
tell me
right there is
when.
pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah, there it
right
is.
there, right there. Yeah,
All
yeah,
right, cool. Let me not yell in the mic.
yeah.
It says Uhuru and Nguvu, right?
Mm,
So I took this picture maybe in 2022. There was a second location of Black Star, which was about a mile away from the original location. And one of the things that they did was they put up these street signs that said Nguvu na Uhuru, power and freedom. Yo, where's Black Star? No, it's not at the corner of Belleville and Slidell. It's at the corner of power and freedom, right? The city would come and take the signs down. They go back, put the signs up. City would come, take the signs out. They go back, they put the signs back up. 2022, the signs were still there. I had made a post on Instagram and somebody was like, the signs are still there. Well, guess what? Slidell was a Confederate ambassador to France. They renamed Slidell in Algiers, which runs the entire length. They renamed it to Red Allen Way. Red Allen was a jazz musician from Algiers, a black man. but they kept the signs up, which means the city was out there changing signs, but still left Nguvu now who were up there, right? Power and freedom. And the reason that this is important to me is because when we talk about the unseen presence, it's not a competition, it's not a negotiation, right? It's not a push and pull. Yo, geographically, our coordinates may overlap, but we are worlds apart. We are not in your world. You are not in ours, right? And that to me, I think is really at the heart of what I'm talking about. We as Black people who are intentional on self-determination and autonomy can build worlds for ourselves. And this book, Under a Black Star, is really a demonstration of how this particular community of Black people in Algiers, New Orleans, United States of America, 2009, 10, 11, in the years following Hurricane Katrina, were able to build that world for themselves. It didn't need to last forever. I don't think that success is a matter of longevity, right? It didn't need to last forever. It is not what it once was, right? But remember, maroonage is a process. It's ongoing. It's amorphous. It takes on different shapes. Bruce Lee, be like water. You get what I'm saying? Like that. So it's not a matter of how long did it last, because guess what? Palmares isn't around either anymore. It lasted 100 years of Portuguese and Dutch warfare, and it was destroyed to the point where they don't even talk about it in that area anymore. Right now, the rest of Brazil and the rest of the world, they'll talk about it. But the fact is that the impact of what was there was enough to, plant a seed that would then, you get what I'm saying? So that to me is, I think what's most important is to really remember that there is, this is a process that is ongoing and really is up to us to continue, So
No, that was dope. I that's fantastic. I appreciate all of that. I really appreciate that. I think I'm just sort of stuck on this whole thing. I never really even considered this point that way about the Maroons were not always even understanding some of the history, the contradictions in their history, but this idea that it was not a mass based movement. So I'm gonna sit with that for a minute and encourage other people to check the book. I have a link to where they can get it in the show description, including to your YouTube channel. And definitely want to do more. Have to talk more about this as I and others read more of the book. Follow up with you on this, and anytime you feel like it, just holler and we can set up another one.
I appreciate
that. Anything else you want to drop or let us know about anything upcoming that or anything at all that I didn't invite you to say that you would want to say before we wrap?
Man, first I just want to, thank you for your persistence and consistency in doing this important work for, as long as I've known of you. Before I even met you, I was listening to you on the radio. So thank you for that. And the other thing is, join. I am building a solar rock movement. I want folks to join. This is the book, the ideas in the book I extend through my music and through my film work. I'm headed to Ghana next month for the Chalewote Street Art Festival, which is the largest street art festival in West Africa. We'll be performing out there, but it's really just an opportunity to really make these connections with, folks not only in the States, but around the continent and around the diaspora.
But what I was going to say is that if safe travels and all that, and if because that sounds dope. If you all want to do something, if you and Samori want to do a pop up from Ghana, let me know. Or if you
that's what's up.
Do something, I would definitely work the time zone thing and work that out, or just hear about it when you get back. And please do extend my greetings to Samori.
Yeah, certainly.
I'm assuming you're going to see him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But please let him know I said what's up, and that all of that sounds fantastic, man. The thing I did want to say is that, and then similarly, I'll invite you also if you want to, or if you have room to do any collaboration around your viewing of Electric Purgatory. I definitely would be interested in your thoughts on that, and
that'll be
and rewatching it myself, and encourage others to check out that documentary because I still think it's very important.
That sounds great.
If you're gonna, or I'll just wait and watch if you're going to cover it on your channel, because I think I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. But
that's what's up.
But all right, my man. Listen, thank you very much again. Congratulations on the work.
Thank you.
Much
Thank
love
you.
to you and your family, and of course, peace to you because I know you are fighting for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll catch you all next time right here at I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.